We have been living in degrowth for many years right now. Our economy is not growing. Our economy is stagnant. If we would have had a green transition earlier, we wouldn't have this problem. I think that our generation still did not really see the great fruits of capitalism that maybe our parents were promised. It's hard to think about climate change if you're hungry. Then the focus has changed. We see deprioritization of environment and climate on all of the levels of all of work in Europe. Deportations are something that are already happening right now in Europe. I think that we have to stay hopeful. Hope is a muscle. If you're a billionaire, there's no way how you can get that much money without exploiting people and nature and animals.
Anja, thanks a lot for being here. You're the co-spokesperson of the Young European Greens. How do you feel today?
Thank you so much for inviting me over. I feel really good. We've had a long weekend of meetings with the executive committee of the board of the Young Greens. So yeah, feeling really inspired. A lot of work to do, a lot of work ahead. Yeah.
About the Young European Greens, if you had to describe your organization just in 3 words, what would be the first ones to come to mind?
I think we are brave. I think we are just, as in justice, not just as a small just. And we are green. We are ecologists. Yes.
Brave, just, and green.
Yeah.
And do you think that this resounds to the messages that you want as an organization to send to young Europeans across the continent? What are the main messages that you would like to communicate?
Yes. Coming back to the previous European elections campaign that we did in 2024, I think that the slogan that we used was quite good and is still quite translates really well. Also, what we do still after the elections and also just with everything else that we do is break the cycle, fight for joy, and that's what we're doing. I think that it's really hard, especially in these times, to realize that even though we're living through really uncertain times where a lot of prospects for the young people seem quite dark, it is still it's still possible to fight for joy, and we still all deserve joy, and happiness is possible. And this is also in essence, I think, what the Young Greens are fighting for everywhere in Europe.
What do you mean with joy? What does joy mean in a political context?
In a political context, I think joy starts from having your basic needs covered. I think it's quite hard to think of someone would say that it's hard to think about climate change if you're hungry. I think that young people are experiencing what also everyone are experiencing right now in Europe. Fighting for your basic rights, fighting for getting your basic needs covered, and at the same time still keeping this hope for the future. Having joy, of course you can have joy and also really hopeless moments, but to have this joy that is actually sustainable.
What I found interesting is that we looked a bit through your social media channels, and indeed this message that you're sending now about joy exemplifies for me that you are developing from a only climate change focused party to a more general progressive party focused also on economic justice issues, social and identity crisis. Do you agree with that your agenda is getting broader as a green party?
I think that the agendas of different, of course, when we talk about green parties, our histories throughout Europe are quite different. In some spaces in Europe, they were just environmentalists, and environment was the only thing that was uniting them. Then in Italy, for example, there was also the social context and also the peace movement context. So I think that we've been always fighting for justice in some sort of ways, but now I think that we're better at translating these messages. Also to the general public.
And talking about justice, we also saw your very cool post on Instagram at the Grammys, with Bad Bunny and Sabrina Carpenter and Eat the Rich. Can you explain a bit to the audience, what do you mean by that? What is your view on being rich, for example?
Oh, wow. So I think that the usual misconception that people have about the slogan of eating the rich, it's we're not talking about people of upper middle class, and we're not talking about people that just get a great salary because they're working in high paying positions. I think that if we're talking about the super rich, and if you're if you're a billionaire, there is no way how you can get that much money without exploiting people and nature and animals. So there we're talking about the ultra rich, and we're talking about the 1%, and we're not talking about the general public that would be richer.
Yeah, and it's a 1% that owns the 50% equal wealth of the bottom. And do you think also with these tech billionaires, also that it comes from a heavy exploitation of the environment?
Yeah, absolutely. What we see now with AI data centers, what we see now with also when we talk about electrification and just general transition of many different areas, it comes also from, for example, exploiting countries with lithium, for example, what we see happening in Serbia, what we see happening even in Finland. So like even, all of these things have also environmental connections.
Yeah. And I think, of course, the 1%, it's already a tiny minority, but then even the 0.1%, then the gap between the 1 and the 0.1 is even bigger. What I'm curious about is the communication strategy behind it. Use a very assertive language and a very strong and emotional messaging, like we hate capitalism or eat the rich. Why this strategy to communicate like this?
Well, it's nice that, first of all, thank you so much for looking through our social media. Social media is only one of the channels that FIG uses to connect our base and to our community. Of course, when we do our political education, it's not just the slogan, it's not just doing the really big kind of words and putting slogans all over the place. This is just one of the ways how to connect with people that might not usually be in the bubble of political news, also using the pop culture, the memes, all of these things, but also these are slogans that are quite true to a lot of young people, right? I think that our generation, I was born in 2001, I think that our generation still did not really see the great fruits of capitalism that maybe our parents were promised. Yeah.
And I think there also one fact of social media, even if you want to convey a moderate message, is also that the communication has to be with something that is very catchy and immediate. No, so you also, I think you work in this direction. And something that for us interests is that, for example, on climate change and climate transition, is also difficult to consider it as just because, for example, the OECD stated recently in a study that if, for example, you give energy subsidies and you promote green economies without targeting, this is going to benefit the high income class, but is negatively impacting the low middle class. Also, what is your view on this? Do you think that climate change, if not tackled well, boosts inequality?
Sorry, can you say that?
No, in the sense that, for example, a climate transition, there is also the risk that boosts further inequality.
No, absolutely. If transition is not done in a just way, it just takes away the jobs from for example, rural areas, right? So that's what is happening with the energy sector, and that is what is happening with many other areas of industry. So it needs to be connected, like the green. That's why the green goes with social, in our opinion, and that's why the whole transition needs to happen in a just way. And that's something that we've been talking about for quite a lot. And I think that now is also a point in which the Greens can also learn that maybe the language that we use about the transition is not entirely ours, and maybe we should actually be more assertive on these things.
Because indeed, I think politically it's also difficult for people that work in an intensive industry, energy intensive, like coal, that depends on their work and families on these jobs, to support a green transition if they do not feel safe.
Exactly.
No? And on this, in terms of policies, also for us to understand, what you want to push for a fair transition, is there some concrete ideas, something?
Starting from education, I think this is one of the things that also historically is part of the just transition, right? When we take away also just concretely, when we close if you close a factory, you need to give these people other ways to educate themselves. But also not only that, I think that part of it is factually true that also if we do want to upkeep the world as we see right now, or in some sort of way, and keep the justice and keep the joy there, it is true that the amount of jobs will decrease. And it is true that the population overall needs some sort of a way how to sustain themselves, and that's why the Greens have been for years and for decades also campaigning for universal basic income, and also just to see how do we see the, like, you know, how can we upkeep the society as we know it, how can we upkeep welfare states in places where we actually still have some remains of welfare states, how can we upkeep the basic services for people, you know, even if a person does not have a job, it doesn't mean that they will not get sick, or if that they will, I don't know, don't have a basic human rights, right? So it comes from the, like, a lot of these social things, and
because the universal basic income also like comes, I think, hand in hand with artificial intelligence. And I think that is interesting because on one hand, artificial intelligence can also help people work from home, so they do, of course, less emissions because they use less the cars to go to work, but on the other hand, like ChatGPT use enormous amount of water, electricity. So like on a balance for your artificial intelligence, is positive or negative for the environment?
That's a great question. And I think that's also a conversation that the Greens and everyone needs to have right now, right? Because I think, in my opinion, and also in what I'm sensing what the young Greens right now in Europe also think, the fact that AI is there and we can use it as a tool, for example, I don't know, in legal matters or in finances and situations where, I don't know, some sort of work that people actually don't want to do. But also, why do we feel so pushed to use ChatGPT or these AI tools in our everyday life? Is that because also since COVID time, we're asked to do more and more and more. And maybe we as a society need to slow down and understand that what is actually needed from us. Do we actually, you know, if the 8-9 hour working day before meant something else, now if you're sitting at your house and you don't have the coffee breaks, you don't have to talk to other people, you're not going to, I don't know, smoke 10 cigarettes a day outside, you actually have a lot of more time in which you're expected to work. And if we even have now, on top of that, we have a tool that also speeds up our work, do we actually need to produce so many outputs in such a short time? Or could we actually use more time on them and use more human resources on these things to make them more meaningful?
And I think this is really the crux of the issue, because I think many people would agree with these statements from, you know, maybe an ideological perspective or a belief perspective. But then I think economically the big issue that's also always counter-argued by, you know, center and center-right parties to say, yeah, okay, we could do that, but then, you know, other economies will overtake us. How do you see this argument?
Well, I think that as political movements and as Europe, it has been, I mean, if we want to compete with other countries, if we want to compete with other unions, we also need to understand what is really our value. Europe is not at the moment competing with the major economies, like economical systems in the world, also because we're so far behind. Maybe if we would have actually invested in education, in innovations in the beginning, maybe we would be in a different spot. So I think that then maybe ideologically we could reinvent what can we give to the world and how can we, you know, we're even now there's so much research done and we have so many results of that. Like there are examples of how we can change the way how our countries and how European Union and how Europe could work. So it would make sense that we would not be dependable on all of the other economies going past us.
Because I think you can also be innovating in the way you approach work, you know? Because I think like they did several studies of working 4 hours per week as well, or tying your daily work to goals and not like to this shift of 8 hours. And actually productivity and output in some cases improved. So it could also be a way. So you will move from this 9-to-5 job. Because also for me personally, it's...
You want to work less.
Yes. 2-4.
Yeah.
For you, like it's something that so you will see a 9-to-5 is a bit an outdated concept.
Yeah, of course. I think that 4-day work week is something that we really deserve and we have deserved for a long time. Also, I mean, with how we see the ecological crisis is going on, and if we want to actually adapt to that, and when we can talk about degrowth a bit later, but also how we see the future, it will be true that if we want to distribute the goods and just, I don't know, make our societies sustainable, it is true that much more people will go back to really hands-on professions. And it is true that you cannot work, like it is historically true that if you work this kind of a profession, you cannot work a 9 to 5. It just doesn't work that way. We need to have an overall re-establishment of how we see work and how we see the value of it, of course.
And we're also seeing this trend from moving from cities by young people to rural areas is something that's also a bit unprecedented in history. You know, it's the first time that also young people are feeling the need to be a bit more disconnected from cities and more to, for example, green areas and so on. So do you think it goes a bit hand in hand with this being tired about this traditional way of looking at work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the pressure is building on. I mean, still the urbanization is going on strong, and in most of European areas it's still a thing, right? But we still need to see how people can actually live a purposeful and enjoyable life while still doing all of that. Yeah.
You said degrowth. Let's talk about it now because because I think it's a really fascinating topic, and I think it stands in the middle of, you know, conflict between the different parties. Really like fundamental disagreements about how our society could work. And I think the first thing to do is to you know, make it concrete, because degrowth is a very in the air concept, and of course what comes with it is that we slow down economic growth. But in your mind and in the discussions you have with within your organization, how do you imagine degrowth to look in practice?
Okay, first of all, FIG, the Young Greens in Europe, we have our own platform, which is Beyond Growth platform, which is a network of yes, which is a network of people that are working. Also, there is one local one in Italy, also now established.
Nice.
So no, it's just an online kind of thing. Yeah, they're all around Italy, also connected to JEV. So yeah. And there are different approaches to that, right? Even within the Greens, we have Beyond Growth, we have Degrowth. But I think that realistically, factually speaking, what Europe is doing and what is Finland doing right now is that we have been living in degrowth for many years right now. Our economy is not growing. Our economy is stagnant. And also that is what's happening in Europe. We're not seeing a crazy we're not seeing a crazy economical growth, right? And the question is, how do we adapt to that? And do we actually see a sustainable way? Okay, first of all, if we've been trying so hard, and if we actually believe that the growth should happen, why is it not happening right now? And why are our societies failing, as well as like just the overall care state as a concept? So there, I think it's actually not that much in the air, but it's just a realistic question that you need to ask yourself, even as a center or right politician. How do you adapt to less money that the state budget has? And that's a question also of degrowth. How do you distribute less money?
Yeah.
In essence, I'm a theologian. Like I studied theology. I don't know that much about money.
Not theology.
I mean, this is very no, but fair. I mean, I think it's also very different. Concept, a difficult concept to wrap around one's head, but for me, what I struggle to imagine, I mean, your approach to explain it was very much to say, now de facto we don't have a huge economic growth, ergo let's try to see how to figure it out. But that's for me different than to say we should as like a base idea not have growth. So I think these are two different ideas. And for me, the second idea to say we should not have growth, I struggle to imagine how this would go, because in the end of the day, like if you see companies, for instance, of course they try to innovate because they try to survive in the market, and individuals try to make little things better to improve their business or whatever they do. So I'm wondering, without stopping this innovative spirit in people and in companies, how do you avoid that the economy continues to grow? Okay, so the innovative spirit can go into making the lives of people better. Maybe the innovative spirit can go into seeing how can we organize our social sector, and also the change in demography. Like, how do we take care of the elderly, and how do we take care of, like, you know, there are so many quite fundamental questions that we still have not answered, or the answers
for them are still somewhere there, but we're not using them. When you, or at least from what I know, the question of degrowth, a lot of scholars that are talking and working on this topic actually don't want to talk about the question of should there be growth or should there not be growth. That's not in the question. The thing is that the thing is more about how do we organize the society and how do we organize the world in different ways, and how do we see world beyond GDP. It's 10, is it?
Almost. My
Fun on the Sunday evening.
Yeah.
No, but here I think that you touch a good point of going beyond GDP.
Yeah.
Because also I think we should ask ourselves, what do we mean for growth? Like, is it just like the number of the aggregate GDP? Or it also means that it's also growth of society in terms of well-being. Because one thing that it's curious that, for example, like, you say in the last 30 years, capitalism has also, for example, reduced poverty and so on. Like it led to, of course, positive net benefit. But on the other hand, if you look at other numbers like mental health, anxiety and so on, it is skyrocketed, no? Yeah. And so do you think there could be like degrowth could also mean looking at growth more comprehensively? And there it could also increase the number of growth in the end.
Absolutely. I mean, you can count it with anything, right? There are different metrics of how to do it. If you think that it's in the base, like it's the human nature to look for growth, you can come up with any metric that will show you any, happiness index. You can come up with all of these things.
Forced.
Right? You can come up with any metric, and then you can grow within it. You can say, I don't know how much food can. I mean, whatever. We have quite many scholars, and we have quite comprehensive research on degrowth and just different sorts of systems. So I really think that we should just disconnect from the idea that there should be growth or should not be growth. I think that we should just understand how, to use our resources responsibly and sustainably, because we are driving into a cliff.
And I also think that one positive development could be to link economic added value to societal added value, no?
Absolutely.
Because I think there also, for a climate perspective, if the economic added value is added value regardless if it's positive or negative as well for the environment, is also something that boosting the climate transition is a bit difficult there. So there, with your association, do we have like some ideas on how to do that, or some cool research scholars that I can read?
Maybe I can link to you some of the names. I'm horrible with names and titles, but there is Kate Roward, someone to read. I mean, starting from care economy. Maria Mazzucato was someone that was also even helping the previous Finnish government with what they organize the care state. So that, I don't know, something interesting.
Oh, nice.
We'll link it and read it. Christian, you can read it.
I can actually,
The FAPS, she was there.
She was there?
European Progressive, I guess.
But the first name you mentioned, is it the one who wrote the donut economics?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just different ways how to...
I think this whole degrowth idea came also very much... was very much pushed by the Green Party, by the Green Movement in relation to the topic of climate change. And I think if we look today at the figures at the time when the Paris Agreement was made in 2015, I think the idea was that we would reach the 1.5 degrees in 2045, so many years, and now the latest research shows that probably we reach already in 3 years from now. So the climate change has continued much quicker than it was originally thought. Where do you think did we go wrong?
Well, the climate change, the climate crisis did not end, and also our economies did not really grow that much. Our welfare did not get better. Our overall content with life as Europeans did not really skyrocket. So clearly there is something wrong. I think that there is a lack of ambition on overall climate investments and investments into just transition. I mean, for example, so that is one thing, and I think that there is also lack of I mean, accountability, right? We keep making these goals for ourselves and keep thinking about carbon sinks, and then all of a sudden it turns out that we calculated them completely wrong. So there's the lack of ambition, and there is lack of accountability, there is lack of responsibility of these governments, and we just are not quick enough.
And being horrible with names, like there is the study of the IPCC that indeed is stating that within the end of the century, if nothing changed, we will reach plus 2.7 degrees Celsius. Like, since we work as beings like with visual images, could you tell us like something striking? If plus 2.7, what means for the planet? What will mean if nothing changes?
I mean, what already the Mediterranean area is experiencing is just absolutely unmanageable horrors. In the coastal areas, there will be. It's not just about the warmth, right? It's not just about the hot summers. It's also about absolutely extreme winters, and it's also about forest fires. It's about droughts. It's about complete change of how we do agriculture, and it's lack of food, it's health problems, absolutely unimaginable number of deaths, but also it means migration, and it means that there will be much less spaces in the world or in areas in the world where people can live life that
like the Indian continent, for example. There were some studies saying that at the current pace, plus 2.7 means that the whole Indian continent will not be accessible anymore. So that means more than 1 billion people migrating. So it's also
the islands, the life as we know it will just not be the same.
And here, are you hopeful in a change of direction?
Absolutely. Yes, and I think that we have to stay hopeful. Hope is a muscle, and hope is not just something that you get out of nowhere, and it's also something that we need to, I mean, it is realistic, it's our generation that will have to deal with all of these things. The fact that the previous generations did not do enough to deal with the consequences of their own actions, and also the actions of the generations that came before, does not mean that we need to continue business as usual, because we cannot. It would be really comfortable to pretend like we could, but it's just not there, and without hope it would be impossible to change the way how we live and to change the world as we want to do.
And yet, for instance, now we know that at European level, at European political level, there was a huge focus on climate policies in the last mandate, so between 2019 and 2024. But the priorities have slightly shifted now in this mandate away from climate policy, more towards economy and economic competitiveness. Did we fail to communicate the urgency of the climate crisis, or are there just now other priorities which are equally important?
I think that's something that stayed from the previous years, is that still the green agenda is still on the table, right? There is a fundamental change now. The climate and environment are still something that you just cannot ignore anymore. But of course, the priorities have changed and the focus has changed. We see deprioritization of environment and climate on all of the levels of all of work in Europe. And I think that is just something that maybe the progressive circles we maybe failed at keeping the pressure and actually shifting the power and making sure that we are not content with what we got, but to ask for more. Because even though the direction would be good, we still need more.
And I think because, just as a background, I mean, in the previous mandate, there were a lot of really milestones reached, and some of these legislation are now either weakened or reassessed. And I think a lot of the reasoning behind this is that the European industry has communicated very strongly that they suffer from strong European environmental legislation, which is not in place in other countries. And they say, look, why should we pay the cost if companies in third countries do not need to do that, and who then have a competitive advantage over us? How do you think this dilemma between, you know, climate ambition and saving jobs and the economy can work in practice?
Well, that is a question of political ambition and ambition to change the systems in a way that we would be able to upkeep not only the jobs, but I mean, I keep saying welfare. As it is, I think that the fact that other areas of world do not have the same levels of regulation is not an argument for deregulation. Also, what we see happening in China, it's not like the other areas of world which are also suffering from climate crisis are not trying to actually place some regulations in place. I think it's a huge win, and it's a legacy that European Union has, and we are really the pioneers of certain areas in this.
And in terms of ambition, does the European Union has the capacity to shape the world approach towards green policies? Because we are a big economic power, but do we have the leverage, for example, if the US shift again towards fossil fuels under the Trump administration and so on? Can we really be the leader in making the world change in a more ambitious direction?
Absolutely, if we do believe in that ourselves, if we are self-sustainable. And I think that now what is happening, for example, in the US is really making us wake up, as Europe, not as Greens, but us as Europe wake up finally, a bit too late, quite much too late, but that to the fact that we need to be so self-sustainable and that we need to, just, you know, establish Europe as what it is, not just as a helping hand or a little brother of some other world power.
Which is not easy at all, because, for instance, now that we had to shift, you know, for instance, imports of natural gas away from Russia, of course, we're now importing much more from the US, who is gaining enormously from an economic perspective.
And if we would have had a green transition earlier, we wouldn't have this problem.
That is also could be part of the intros. Yes, I would say. Yeah. No, but I think also there are also some interesting examples, like China, for example, is the biggest polluter, but it's also heavily investing in solar panels, and is one of the, for example, the most advanced countries in terms of cutting emissions and so on. So it's also difficult to draw a line. Yeah. And but if you would like to see a European Union stronger on climate, like in dictating the climate agenda of the world, what you would like to see first, the European Union to do?
What we saw at COP last year already in Brazil was that Europe was one of the countries, one of the partners that did not strive for climate ambition. There were countries that were advocating for more funds to overall global south that is a victim and is suffering from climate crisis already now, and also suffering from all of the, everything that the global north has done with industries and so on and so on. So I think that the first thing would be that, Europe has a lot still to do, and we're really not the pioneers of environmental policies and also financing these things. We could invest so much more, and we could invest, we are not giving even close enough to what we need to give to just transition, to climate mitigation, to adaptation, all of these things. Again, what happened in Brazil was better than what we expected, but it's still really, really not enough. Yeah.
And do you see that the shift of the Trump policy is really something that can make the climate objective impossible to achieve? Or after Trump, we are still on time? Because he will, at the end of his mandate, we are still way closer to 2050 at the end.
I think if we wait for his mandate to end, then we are already too late. We need to shift and continue our work, regardless of what is going on in the US, because in the end of the day, I don't think that we here in this studio really think that we should be the one affecting the American politics, right? So we do need to upkeep and upscale our work.
I know it's for you also personally to see what's happening there in the US. Also, we look at your social media with something that is happening with ICE and the episodes of Alex Pretti, for example. Like, how does it make you feel? This, and is it something that you fear is going to happen also in Europe, or could happen so easily?
I mean, Europe, we've had Frontex and we've had really violent I'm so sorry, but we've had really violent border policies since before the whole ICE thing last month happened. We do have violent amount of deportations in Europe from Finland and from all the other European countries, and that happened long before Trump, you know? So I think that that's already reality in Europe, and the fact that now the like ICE agents are not going around our streets shooting people does not mean that yes, exactly, does not mean that something quite close to that is already happening. We just don't see it because also the general public does not, maybe we don't want to see it, and maybe also our governments and the states are so good and normalizing it, right?
Did you see, because on this, for example, I don't have personal knowledge, like that the same level of violence was also applied in some cases by Frontex agents?
Yes. If you look at the Croatian border, there has been reported violations of all human rights imaginable, yeah. And different media sources have been reporting on it. Also what is happening in Greece and in Italy, right, on the coastal borders. It is violence.
And now there is on the table this new proposed revision of EU migration policy, the EU return regulation. You've been very vocal also on this proposed law. Can you tell us what it would entail in practice and how you see this development?
Yeah, so deportations are something that are already happening right now in Europe and has been happening for decades, right? What does the whole regulation mean in essence is that it would be possible to return people to third countries that are not their countries of origin, from which they're not coming, already before their court cases have been finalized, which means that you would be sent out to a third country before you even know what is ruled on your case, right? So that's one of the things, and just that the frameworks are making it so much easier to not work until the end with all of the cases. That's what it is in essence, and that's what it is, normalizing sending people to and kind of buying spaces outside of Europe to send people off, which is already happening in Turkey, for example, right? That majority of all of the refugees are not coming to Europe; they're coming to these third countries, third spaces that we don't really see. And as Europe, it's really great for us to keep our diplomatic ties with all these countries that keep all of these refugees. It's just making it easier.
And on one hand, geopolitically, it can also make Europe weaker, for example, because then this third country like Turkey, they have a leverage as well to say, no, political leverage. If you don't, for example, do from a trade perspective also what is favorable to me, even if it's blocking human rights, I then unlock this migration
and that is what is happening.
Can you tell us something on this specifically? For example, Turkey has an example like of this is happening, like in which sense, but also for me, because I'm not entirely updated on this case.
Well, for example, in Turkey, you mean?
Yes.
I mean, Turkey holds millions of refugees coming from Syria and other countries, and any sort of diplomatic question that comes between EU and Turkey is also there's a lot at stake, right? And Europe has a lot to lose. That's one of the examples. Also, I mean, that's just I don't know how far should I go in that, but But
No,
basically
but it's already
every
went quite
yeah,
far.
but basically every conversation that you would be having with any sort of a partner which already has, you know, a lot of things that, kind of that they can use against you is already a really unequal conversation, right?
Yeah, and I think it might also possibly have influenced last year the response of the EU following the incarceration of the opposition leader by Erdogan. No, like these I think these are elements which play very much into the response of the EU.
And that is also happening with mining in Serbia, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, but there it's not a migration topic.
No.
It's then more a question of access to raw materials. No, I understand.
Yeah, but also we touched upon that a bit earlier. So
yes, I think for me with migration, what's so striking is that it's one of the issues which really polarizes a lot in Europe. Because in general, I think compared to the US, we're way less polarized in our political debate. But on migration, I think we have very strong opposing views with, you know, the center-right parties arguing, or let's start with the right, maybe the far right arguing, you know, we just don't want these people because they don't have our identity, our culture, we lose who we are. Then there is the center-right who basically argues, you know, we don't have a problem with identity, but we think that if we let so many in, then the far right will gain, so we don't want them in. And then there is the center left and the left, which are more, you know, welcoming. And so there's a broad spectrum, you know. Are you more on the side of saying, you know, like everybody's welcome, or there should be limitations, but right now there are too many?
I think that everyone are welcomed, and I think that no one is illegal. I think that no human is illegal. I think I personally, it's one of my core beliefs that, you know, every human has a right to live and right to live in humanly, as I'm sorry for the use of the same words, conditions.
Okay.
And that's just my values, right? And that's just something in what I believe, which is funny because, you know, then the same Christians are applying completely unchristian values to, or like messages and beliefs to people that are still human, to people that are coming looking for a better life. But something that we need to realize, or something that maybe the far right and the center right and even the center left in some countries need to realize, is that it's just impossible to stop people from coming. It is impossible. It is impossible to stop people from coming, to looking for better life, looking for life, and especially with the climate. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the map, but especially with the climate crisis and the amount of movement that people will need to do, it is a silly fantasy to think that there will be a way how to stop all of these people. You cannot build a border around, like you cannot build a border in the sea, right? So there it's a question of preparedness for that. We need to know how do we prepare our society, how do we prepare our systems and institutions so that people can actually adapt, so people can live a normal life, and so people can educate themselves, feel like they are actually part of society and that they're not looked down on, and that they have a future, right?
Yeah, but and then beyond an ethical perspective and point of view, do you think it's also practically sustainable? For example, like if we welcome everyone, do you think it's sustainable for our society? I'm thinking a country like Italy, where you have a lot of already youth unemployment, a lot of really socioeconomic issues. Do you think it's something sustainable and can also create a net benefit?
I think it can be sustainable, and I think it can create a net benefit. And I think that's realistically that's something that we need to do. It's not a question of if it will happen or if it not will happen. It will happen violently, and so that everyone will not win, or that everyone will lose. That everyone will lose, or it will happen in a way in which we realize what are the givens and what are the facts and how can we deal with that. Yeah,
because one positive aspect, for example, of migration can help also the EU deal with such profound issues like aging or fertility rate decline and so on, at least in the short term. But one other aspect is, if you look, for example, at the perception of security numbers, Europeans feel less safe than, for example, some decades ago. Do you think this is factual or is more a perception issue there?
I think it's about everything. I think that the life just became less safe. I think that when my grandma is talking about her life right now, she says that it's so unpredictable, which makes you feel unsafe. It doesn't matter if you live next to an Afghani person or if that person is Italian, you know? It's also just about how we evolve culturally and what do we see as safe, you know? As the same kind of a person back in the 20s, like 1920s, would feel that something else is safe and something else is unsafe.
Yeah, because the entire political battle there, I think it's around the theme of security as well.
Yeah.
Not more of sustainability, but of security. Yeah. Like the party that are against migration, they use it as a threat to Christian values, but in particular they say that is increasing, making people feel less secure. And so this for you is objectively wrong. Like it's something that it does not really exist. It's not a real problem.
And if you tell people that they're unsafe, will they feel safe?
Yeah, no, of course, but I think that, like the argument that you would need to counter is because those people argue we feel unsafe because they're illegal migrants, as they call them. So we need to get rid of them to feel safe again. But how you are arguing is that actually the feeling of unsafety is a broader societal issue which transcends the problem of migration.
If we as humans believe that that kicking people out of a country to unsafe spaces or like to other unsafe lands, and if we think that after doing this, after removing a certain part of a population to outside of Europe, and that will make us feel safe, doesn't that sound like something that happened already at some point of history? I think that then we're fucked up as a society, and I think that that's a cultural, sociological, just a broad human question.
Yeah, and here I would like to come back to a video I watched some months ago about the perception in the north of Italy about southern Italian citizens, and it's really impressive because they say the same exact thing, for example, us as Italian citizens broadly or right-wing parties are saying about foreigners. Like have the same exact security ideas and perception and so on. So it's something that for you is like an exploitation of this thematic rather than a concrete issue.
Absolutely.
And do you think there are some migration that brings more issues than others in the sense of integration, with some background is more difficult to integrate than with others, or also this is a misconception?
I think that that's a really tough question. I mean, the more you try to go into that, the more you realize that it just varies so much. And what do you like? How do you see difficulties, right? I personally, like in my personal life, I work with social work and family work, and we focus specifically more on Eastern Helsinki, which is considered to be more of a area with more immigrants. There, the questions of integration are quite fundamental, but I wouldn't consider them to be something that is not overcomable. So I think that it really depends on a country. It really depends on the specific question, and it really depends on the point of time in which you're looking at that. So no, I would not think that there is a certain nation that is less suited to be European.
And you as as the young European Greens, because in the end, like that's now also one of your main roles.
Yeah.
Like regardless of whether we're speaking about migration or about income inequality or climate change, or different topics we talked about today. How do you see your role as an organization, but also as a spokesperson, in addressing those issues? Is it mainly a communication role, so shaping of public opinion, or is it more really lobbying policymakers, or is it trying to recruit new members? What's your focus?
So FIEG is a federation of organizations, and what we can do is we do political education, and there we can offer concrete tools for future change makers, but also for people that campaign, people that just do work in different areas in their day-to-day life. So that's political education, in which we just can offer factual information and also kind of translate our own stances, but to people that also are interested in them. also what we do is lobbying. We lobby towards the mother party. We lobby towards the European group in the European Parliament. We also lobby to external partners. So that's something that we do. And also, of course, something that also now came with the social media and the digital campaigning that we do is that we can translate that to broader public and to kind of bring that outside of our cool networks.
How big are you as an organization? Like how many members? Just to give also the listeners a bit of an idea of the scale.
Oh wow! When I was elected, someone said that it's more than 40,000 members.
Oh, wow.
Now, actually looking at how, for example, the Young Greens of England and Wales are growing now with the Green Wave over there, I would say that it depends on how you count, but there is definitely more than 70,000 young Greens out there.
Wow.
But yeah, it also depends on how you count.
And covering all member states of the EU? Also outside of the EU, maybe?
Yeah, also outside of the EU, but not all of the member states of the EU. For example, we don't have a member organization in Slovenia. And we are yet to welcome soon member organizations from Denmark and Lithuania. But outside of the EU, we also have member organizations in Serbia, in Azerbaijan, in Georgia.
Oh, well, Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
Quite,
yeah, in Turkey.
Yeah. And since you start politics, since you are 16, if I remember well, like, is there a specific moment you are very proud of, because it's been a long ride, like something that you still remember and you are very happy and glad that you made it?
Me personally?
Yes, you.
On a political level, I used to be a vice council member in my local town, and there I was working mainly on schools, because schools are a big question in rural areas and towns, and especially in Nordics. Now we are, especially let's say 5 to 10 years ago, we're having a lot of problems with the buildings, the mold, humidity as a big problem with buildings that were built with buildings from 60s and 70s, and we had a huge problem with kind of rebuilding, and also problems with questions of how do we get the investments, and how do we are we ready to invest so much into all of those kind of things. So I think I'm really proud of what the Greens did with education and keeping schools safe and healthy for people. That's one of the things. What else? Personally,
you can also tell us later and we'll mix things. Create an AI version of you.
But you've always been, since the beginning of your political career, part of the Greens, or was there some finding moment in the beginning where you were not sure where to start?
In the really beginning, I subscribed to the newsletter of the Social Democratic Youth and the Leftist Youth, and but I think that the Greens just the Greens spoke about the topics that I cared about and that I care about. The Greens are and have been always for human rights, and that's something that we as also FAG stand behind. A funny story, the Social Democrats, I subscribed to their newsletter, and then apparently if you subscribe to their newsletter, they put you in their membership. And then for many years I didn't know that I was a member of the Social Democratic Youth in Finland until they finally emailed me like 3 times saying, can you pay your membership fee? And I was at this point, I was running for the local elections for the Greens, and I was like, my God.
Oh, that's a diplomatic issue.
Yes, what are you doing? But not actually.
They didn't kick you out of the Greens. That's
I begged for the Social Democrats to kick me out, and that took a call and emails and more calls, but then that happened in the end.
But even without paying, they were
they were like, please. I know,
don't want you to
because the membership numbers are quite important for getting funding, right?
Yeah. It's true, it's a good statistic as well for that. And also, like, doing policies at 16, no? Like, was it difficult in the sense that you were a bit surrounded by people that were interested by other things, or has always been a passion for you. You were not like caring that it was something, because what I remember when I was 16, not many people were interested.
Christian was doing music.
Exactly.
Oh, really? What kind of music?
I was doing like kind of rap pop music. There are
yeah,
some
that's
songs.
pretty
We can be the new intro.
Please, that would be cool to
Yeah.
see. I mean, I think that in the Nordics, overall, the youth involvement in politics and in social, like in civil society, people get involved with these things much younger than, for example, in Italy, from where I know that, for example, running for certain political positions, you cannot run for them if you're, let's say, 25.
I think it's the camera, no? You can do 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Senate 40.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so that's insane to me. When I heard this for the first time, I was quite shocked. So I think that there's also a lower threshold for
But it's true that in Italy at 40 you are a teenager.
Yeah.
Italy has a very particular culture when it comes to age and politics.
Age and politics, right?
Exactly, and leaving the house and so on.
Yeah, and that's also something that, you know, countries where the social security is in a better place and in which people are able to, for example, move out of their houses if they want to, and if people are able to sustain themselves already when they're younger, of course you also have more mental space to engage in things that are also about you as like a part of the society, as an active member of society. But if you don't have all of these things and you have to struggle for your basic needs, of course, then involvement happens later.
And I think for this, youth organizations are very important to make sure that, you know, young people get engaged and try to become politically active. At the same time, now what we heard from different representative of youth organizations, and we understand that the same applies to you, is that the funding is cut back, the EU funding, and also for you, we understood that at least partly you lost the commission funding. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Do you know the background?
Yeah, so we did lose the big operational grant that we usually that we would get for 3 years. That is the commission money. How these work is that you apply for the funds and then you get a certain amount of points out of. Now this time it was 100. This time our points were actually better than they were before in the previous cycle. And also we've heard about examples of other organizations that also got quite good ratings and didn't get it. There is less money and there is more competition, and also, there is the question of that there is not enough money, and that the bigger organizations that would be not usually applying for like middle-sized or smaller organizational grants are now applying for those, and now we have to compete against like the double amount of those.
How, now that you know that this money is lost or not available anymore for the next 3 years, how do you deal with this? How does it impact your work? What consequences does it have?
Well, we are now, we launched a fundraising campaign and we are looking for donors to help us sustain our work. As FIG, we have quite a clear core of what we still are able to do. Now what happens is that we are now no longer able to give that much support to our member organizations, for example, and that hits specifically the smaller organizations that are just evolving. And also that means, so we have a plan how to work on this, but fundraising is also, I think, is something that is part of, more and more becoming a part of every civil society organization's life.
I would say that it has been a very cool episode, and thanks a lot for coming, Anja. And usually we conclude with one question, like this, with the moving Europe, like how would you, if you want to see Europe different in one thing, to move Europe on just one thing, what would you say?
One thing. I would love to see Europe actually act on its perceived values and see human rights and basic human lives as something valuable and something that is not a question, but a shared fact that we all have, that we all are worth the same.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot.
Anja.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye.